Five.
There we go.
Cool. What's up, James?
Corey, how are you, my friend? It's Black Monday.
It's Black Monday. It's the first live stream I've done on my channel in a few weeks, a good few weeks, since I just don't have the time to do live streams on top of the videos I already do. But
Right.
I appreciate you jumping on. And this week I didn't have time to do another in studio video because holidays haven't been able to do it last week either. But I figure, I need to put something up there because some big news has happened.
A lot,
And
a lot of big news has happened.
I feel like we should talk about it. I know
Yeah.
you did a live stream on your channel. Let me adjust myself here. Um, and you talked a lot about it. I know Petercast talked a lot about it last night, but I still feel like there's just a lot of discussion to be had by way of just how the season has gone and how the season ended, and then obviously the whole head coach situation.
Right.
So there's lots to talk about, and thanks, guys, for joining. For those of you who can and are, I see the remixers. What's up, Buccaneers Super Bowl 37 champs, Buccaneer. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to all of you who are trickling in. Again, it's been a while since I've done a live stream, so I appreciate you guys being on the up and up and jumping in here. So, James, I guess my first question for you was, were you one of the ones rooting for a loss?
No. No, I was not, but I understand why people wanted a loss, because better draft position and all that. I believe you were the one who made the point of saying, like, you know, it's nice to root for your team to win. That's kind of the mindset I'm in. At the end
Yeah,
of the day, I do want to see my team win. And just because you have a high draft pick doesn't mean you're going to hit on that draft pick.
right.
That's a very true statement. It happens. And the teams that usually are consistently good, they can still hit on the late end draft picks.
Yep.
So, I mean, yes, you have a better chance to get a good player, but that's really all it is. It's just a better chance to get a really good player, in a way. You can still get just as good players, if not better players, in later picks. It all just depends on, your scouting department and the types of players that your GM looks at.
Hmm.
That's all it depends on. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I was rooting for the Bucks to win. I understand both sides of the argument, wanting them to win, wanting them to lose. I wouldn't say the people who wanted them to lose aren't real fans, because that's whatever.
Yeah.
If you're a fan, then you're a real fan. That's the way I see it. But yeah, I was rooting for them to win. What about you?
Yeah, I've been very adamant. I've been very vocal, at least on Twitter, and I made a video about it, about rooting for a win. I see some more people trickling in. Thanks for joining us, John Thornton and Frank XXX311. Thanks for joining us, guys. And obviously, I mentioned Buccaneer. That's our friend Tommy,
There
who's
you go.
jumped in. But yeah, man, and there will be plenty of time to talk about the draft and specific players later on. I mean, we've got a long off season ahead of us. And as the mock drafts come out and the people start talking about all the players who have decided to forego their senior year and all that stuff, things will come together and we'll be able to see who will get at 5 as opposed to who we would have gotten at 11 or 12. So it's going to be an ongoing kind of debate. But I went through and I just looking at past drafts and all of the major players for us and all the wins that happened, they did not correlate with where we drafted ever. And when we drafted high, we sucked as a team. When we drafted low, we were more on the winning side. So I honestly think drafting lower is indicative of your team on an upward trend. And if you root for your team to lose, you are rooting for a losing mentality. That's how I see it. That's how I don't think I'll ever move from that, just because I'm a fan, pure and simple. I've had a lot of arguments with Thomas Bassinger, T-Bass.
I saw
Uh,
that. Yeah.
Big fan of his. I mean, I love everything he does. He takes such a great analytical approach to things, but he's a journalist. I mean, he's not a fan, so he takes the emotion out of it, which is probably for the better. But just, I don't think he can truly understand rooting for a win because, listen, we were playing the Falcons and we were playing for nothing. But had we beat the Falcons, I'm not sure where we would have fallen. I know we would have been ahead at least one team, and we would not have come in last place in the division. And so when you're talking about, oh, over the last 5 or 6 years, the Bucs have finished last in the division almost every single year, that stuff gets brought up years after. So we will remember that. We will remember how often we finished last in the division. That is a big deal for a fan. And I didn't want that to happen. I didn't care where we wanted to draft. And like you said, you can draft great players later on in the first round. So, but anyway, that is kind of burying the lead. What's done is done. And Dirk Koetter was fired, and he was fired quickly. Were you surprised to see him fired so quickly, like on Sunday night? Did you think they were going to release it today?
Yeah, I was 100% surprised. It was, I think the Peter cast had did like a timer on it. It was like 3.5 hours after the end of the game.
Yeah,
They said, "Okay, we're firing him." I thought that was way quicker, especially with all the reports that had come in saying, "Oh, they might keep him. Who knows? Nobody knows what the Glazers are going to do." It led you to believe, well, they might take their time, really think over it. They knew, they knew right away what they were going to do.
yeah,
I was very surprised, especially after the press conference. After the game, they had Dirk Koetter's press conference. He said, "We have a meeting tomorrow at 11 a.m. Maybe I'll be there." I was like, "Oh, okay, maybe he will be there. Who knows?" No,
yeah.
no, they just wasted absolutely no time. It was very surprising.
Yeah, I didn't vocalize it. I should have tweeted it, but I had that thought actually as I was driving home from Florida. I was in Orlando visiting family for Christmas, and we were driving up during most of the game. Had to watch it on my phone, and when it ended, and I was driving kind of the rest of the day, I had that thought. Like I actually started having my wife check my Twitter feed as we were driving, just over and over again, because I was like, you know what, I have a feeling that since we lost, they might go ahead and just do it. Like, why make him wait a day when he knows it's over? We all knew that Dirk knew he was done for. I mean,
Yeah.
so why drag it out? And I think that's what they did. They're like, okay, we all know what this is. Let's just go ahead and not make you sleep wondering what's going to happen. Let's just go ahead and do it. And I think that was the right decision. So
Yeah.
I think if we won, they might have waited until Monday to let him enjoy the win and not like just throw a wet blanket on like the joy of winning.
Hmm.
So that's what I think probably would have happened. But since we lost, why wait? So
One thing that it also makes you question is, it's like the Glazers, they knew what they were going to do. How long did they know they were going to do that? The Glazers, we always say the Glazers don't do mid-season firings. That doesn't mean that they've already made up their minds at a certain point. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Just because they don't fire somebody mid-season doesn't mean it's like, it's pretty much going to be over for this guy weeks in advance. You know what I mean? So I thought that was kind of interesting. It kind of lends to it that quickly because it's like they didn't even consider it. They were like,
Yeah,
nope, nope, it's over. How long did they have that opinion? Who knows?
yeah, yeah. Who knows? I mean, I do commend the Glazers for having the standard of, hey, let's not fire a coach midseason. It's a little frustrating as a fan because it's like once you know the writing's on the wall, why? Just why? Like why keep going?
Right.
But I think you have to take everything like every instance as it comes. You can't have a set standard of never doing this or always doing that. But you know, what's done is done, and this season was a wash anyway by like week 10. So um, it is what it is. Are you? And I see some people in here in the chat mentioning Jason Light. Did you expect Light to get fired along with Dirk Koetter?
I actually talked about this with Rhett of the Cannon Fire podcast a few days ago. I didn't
Mhm.
expect him to be fired. I figured that, especially since they had announced, he'll be under contract through the 2019 season. I thought that meant that he was pretty much safe. Um, Considering all the moves Lights made with trading for Jason Pierre-Paul, that was a huge one. Signing Carl Nassib, another
Yep.
big one. He
Hmm.
re-signed Mike Evans. He re-signed Ali Marpet. That's a good thing for a general manager when you can re-sign your own draft picks. Um, and Jason Light's been able to do a ton of moves like that. And he brought in Jameis Winston, who the Glazers, they like a lot, apparently. It's why they're bringing him back in 2019. Um, it's kind of been like talk's been kind of surfacing that the Glazers are still like Jameis Winston a good deal. Jason Light was the guy who drafted Jameis Winston, so
Hmm.
and they trust him enough now to continue doing this new head coaching search. So I think that um, it's not too surprising. I feel the Glazers do trust him a lot, and I thought he was going to stay.
Yeah. I said this on Buck What You Heard, but I kind of was of the opinion that, like, yes, I am. I definitely see more than ever. Like, I used to be a Jason Light truther. Like, I was just like, he's been just the best GM we've had since Rich McKay, et cetera. But man, it's angered me so much with some of the picks that he's made recently that I would have been okay had they let him go. However, we had not seen yet Jason Light hire a coach from outside the organization. Ultimately was the one who hired Koetter, but that was a different situation where the candidates outside of the organization just were not that great. So why not go ahead and bring Koetter back, who was grooming Jameis, and you wanted to keep that same offensive system with a young quarterback. You didn't want to disrupt that for Jameis's growth. So it made sense to hire Koetter at the time. And now this is the first time, and Light said in his press conference, like, hey, we're going to go outside the organization. Right. And I think he said it so emphatically because it's what he wants to do. I think he even realizes, like, hey, I haven't had a chance to, like, go and find a new guy to come and bring in here, the guy I really want. Like, who knows how much influence the Glazers had on Koetter? I mean, I don't know, but we can only speculate there. But I expected Light to stay. I had an inkling, and I'm kind of okay with it. Mm-hmm. Are you? How do you feel about the way he has built this team?
I think that he's done a really good job. The way I see it is Jason Light is average to below average in terms of his free agency and how he's been able to do in regards like that. But in the draft and even through trading, Jason Light pretty much knocks it out of the park in most ways. He drafted Jameis Winston, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. He brought in Adam Humphries as an undrafted free agent. He drafted O.J. Howard. He brought in Cameron Braid as an undrafted free agent. Donovan Smith, Ali Marpet, Peyton Barber, undrafted free agent, Ronald Jones. Pretty much any marquee player that you know on this offense, Jason Light's responsible for bringing them in. On the defensive side of the ball, he drafted Quan Alexander, he drafted Kendall Beckwith, he drafted Justin Evans, he drafted Vernon Hargraves, he traded for Jason Pierre-Paul, he signed Carl Nassib, he drafted Vita Vea, who people are finally starting to come around to. Jason Light's added a ton of talent to this team, and a lot of the players that the Buccaneers fans like right now, Jason Light was responsible for getting them. Now, he's not obviously, exempt from criticism. Roberto Aguayo, Nick Folk, the entire kicking situation in general, a lot of that's on Jason Light. Yeah. I will say that some certain aspects of that are kind of uncontrollable for Jason Light, but also, he's brought in, I believe, 7 kickers since he's been here. That's crazy. That's absolutely insane. And then you bring in players like Chris Baker, who didn't work out. Deshaun Jackson now has pretty much been the offensive version of Chris Baker in a certain way, except more naturally talented. Jason Light's had his fair share of misses, but a lot of the players that Bucs fans want to be brought back and want to remain on this team, Jason Light was responsible for bringing them in the first place. So I think he's done a pretty decent job overall.
I think some people, especially the ones who just really hate Light, love to bring up his failures and throw that in his face, which obviously that's what you do when you're a detractor and you're making a case against a guy. But you always have to, people seem to forget the context in which guys were brought in. And people were lauding Jason Light for certain moves that he made that didn't pan out, that he's now getting thrown back in his face. So, like, at the time, the things that he did for this defensive line, the guys he brought in, and somebody like Mitch Unrein, for instance, didn't work out. Injured, can't really help that. Bo Allen didn't live up to his expectation. Vinny Curry didn't live up to his expectation. Right. And somebody might throw that back in Jason Light's face, but at the time, we all would have made the same move. And I know this because we all praised the moves. Right. So it's like you can't bash the guy for doing something when you agreed with it at the time and you would have made the same move. Right. And I think a lot of people forget that. Now, obviously, drafting a kicker in the second round it's pretty unforgivable.
Trading up for one, no less, is what.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Trading up into the second round to get a kicker. That was a bad move, and that's worth all the criticism it gets. But things like, bringing in Chris Baker, for instance, another one that people hated him for, but everybody saw how good he was, before he came in for the Redskins, how are we supposed to know that he was just, somebody who hates practicing and just wanted the payout? I mean, it's hard to know until you assign the guy.
Right.
So, anyway, I think people also have a hard time comparing GMs because it's hard to find the information on GMs around the league without really digging for that information. So people will only compare Jason Licht based on his booms and his busts, but they don't compare his percentage of booms and busts against other GMs in the league because that would take a lot of research, and no one does that. I've been waiting for a journalist or somebody who's full-time writes for the Bucs to do that, and I feel like no one's actually accurately done it.
Yeah.
So anyway, regardless, Jason Licht is here to stay because he's leading the coaching search. So based on that, oh, by the way, another thing I just thought of is that you brought up Ronald Jones, and that is actually one of the picks that I have been shaking my head ever since the pick. And I know you and I had conversations about this ever since he was picked, that I was hesitant about Ronald Jones because every single person that I trust that evaluates players coming into the draft, they all said that he was a very risky pick because he just did not seem like he'd be NFL ready and that he may not ever pan out. And then sure enough, here we are a whole year later, and he hasn't done anything.
Right.
He had opportunities and he dropped the ball literally. And he was never – and now people can say the offensive line is to blame there, but Peyton Barber had the same offensive line, and you could tell how hard he ran and made the holes work that he got. And Rojo just never really – he hardly ever passed the line of scrimmage. So
right.
Anyway, that stood out to me because you called him a marquee player, and
I'll hold
I
off
know we've had discussions before, but I wanted to bring that up.
Retract that one then. Retract Ronald Jones. The jury's still very much out on Ronald Jones.
I'm not going to call him a bust by any stretch, but it's not looking good, and it's just adding fuel to the fire of my hesitancy when we drafted him, especially when Darius Geis was available. Now, of course, we don't know how good he is because he got hurt immediately. So,
right.
Anyway, so I guess the next question is then, we've all been looking at head coaching candidates. I made a video about it. You've made multiple videos about it. You've talked about it. If you were to cards on the table, gun to your head, who is the number one guy that you would want for this team to coach the Bucs?
Is this me saying who I think's going to end up being the head coach or who I want to be the head coach?
Who do you want to be the head coach?
Well, that's such a tough question to answer. Well, gun to my head, I don't want to die. So, I've really warmed up to the idea, and I think a lot of Bucs fans have, of Bruce Arians. That kind of is the most logical pick from many standpoints. I really like Bruce Arians a lot. There are concerns about his age. He's 66 years old, and he does supposedly have health concerns. A lot of people think that about Pete Carroll, and he just signed a 3 or 4 year extension. He's going to be there till he's 70. And just in the past, you've seen coaches that go out there and coach well into their, later years. Look at Tom Coughlin. And Tom Coughlin was there forever. So it is possible. It is 100% possible. But it's not just about, bringing in Bruce Arians. It's about bringing in people who, if they were to bring in Bruce Arians, people who could succeed him. You know what I mean? It's about building that consistency and building that kind of coaching pedigree in Tampa Bay. You can have options who worked with Bruce Arians if Bruce Arians has to retire later on down the line. You know what I mean? It's not just about trusting Bruce Arians, bringing him in. It's about who he would recommend as his successors when he would eventually have to leave.
Right.
It's like playing the really long game. Bruce Arians could be one of the better options for that. Look at Andy Reid. Andy Reid's coaching tree is insane. So really, I think you could have a very similar situation to a guy like Bruce Arians. And he would be my top pick right now. There are obviously concerns with his health and his age and whatnot, but for that, it doesn't really concern me that much at all. He'd have to be my top guy.
Yeah, I love Arians. I really love Arians. I like him so much that when he became the coach of the Cardinals and they had their first year under him, the Cardinals kind of low-key became my second favorite team. I just loved the attitude that team had under him. I just liked who he was at the podium, like a very entertaining head coach, and just what he did to turn around that franchise. I was super intrigued, and also what he did in Indianapolis. I mean, when Pagano had to leave because of his health. I mean, Arians. Did the Colts? I could be wrong here, but it seems like the Colts had their best year under Arians over Luck's tenure with Arians as the head coach, or at least one of the best.
Right, I believe so. I think it was one of the years they went 10-6 or something like that,
Yeah,
and did really well in the playoffs. So Arians, he's pretty much successful wherever he goes, for the most part, in certain ways.
and if you guys are interested in Arians and it looks like we might hire him, I recommend you guys looking up the All or Nothing season with the Arizona Cardinals. That will show you kind of who he is as a coach and how he coaches. Obviously, it doesn't show you everything, but it's basically like Hard Knocks for the entire season when they were trying to chase after a Super Bowl victory. I think they made the playoffs that year. They beat the Bucs that year, so we get to relive that funness. But it was a really cool series to watch. It's on Amazon Prime. But so there's Bruce Arians, and then we'll keep with the retreads. There's Mike McCarthy. Some people want Mike McCarthy. What are your thoughts there?
Well, the latest with Mike McCarthy, and keep in mind this is in no way confirmed one way or the other, but a lot of people on the Twitterverse feel that McCarthy's more likely than not going to be the next head coach of the Cleveland Browns. Obviously, we have no idea if that's going to end up happening or not, but I would really, Mike McCarthy's up there on my list as well. I would really like him, especially what he can do with offenses. 125 wins, 77 losses, Super Bowl win. He's got the resume, and he knows how to build strong offenses. It was obviously easier for him considering he had Brett Favre followed up next in line by Aaron Rodgers, two Hall of Famers. That'll make it
Yeah.
easy for anybody. I think a lot of us could go out there and be the head coach for Aaron Rodgers and still win some games. Because he's just that good, and Brett Favre was just that good. So
Yeah.
that does put a little bit of a damper on his overall pedigree. But, like I said, the man knows how to build some offenses. He can get stubborn in some ways, much like Dirk Koetter, with not using the running game in certain ways, especially this season. It was very apparent. But the guy's a proven winner. He would pretty much be the ultimate thing of like bringing a Super Bowl winner to the organization, because it's one thing to bring a player who was on a Super Bowl winning team. It's another thing to bring a head coach who won a
Who's
Super
been
Bowl.
there for sure.
And head coaches like that don't come up very often. It'd be as if, maybe not as like high end for the Buccaneers, but like it'd almost be as if John Harbaugh or Mike Tomlin were out there. Because they have just as impressive resumes as Mike McCarthy. It's just that Mike McCarthy is offensive mindset, and John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin are defensive mindset.
Right.
And everybody, Bucs fans all agree, they would have loved John Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin. So,
Yeah.
I think that he would be a really nice option, but it sounds like he's probably going to go to Cleveland.
Yeah, speaking of Harbaugh, a lot of people are saying that we might, like, there's rumors that somebody might trade for Harbaugh. I don't think I would want that. I honestly, with McCarthy and Arians available, I don't know if I would want to go down that route unless we're in a desperate situation like we were when we traded for John Gruden after Bill Parcells left us in the dust. So I like Harbaugh a lot, but I don't think that's going to happen. And if it does, I'd be scared about what we'd have to give up to get him. So, because for John Gruden, we had to give up 2 firsts and 2 seconds, and that set us back
Right.
after he got here. So I'm not sure I'm for that. But back to McCarthy, so both McCarthy and Arians would excite me because of them knowing, like, that would be the best case scenario for Jameis Winston. I still believe Jameis has a lot left in the tank as far as potential, and I think those two guys could help him get there, especially Arians, who's worked with quarterbacks that are similar to Jameis's style, like Ben Roethlisberger, and even Andrew Luck to a little bit, to some degree. And then Mike McCarthy, obviously, the pedigree that he has. The issue I think I have with McCarthy, and I've said this on Twitter too, is that the big slam on him for Packers was that he was very stubborn and refused to use players the players that seem to be better, he kind of refused to put them in the spotlight, so to speak. So, for instance, the big example is Aaron Jones, who was clearly their best running back out of the 4 or 5 running backs they had there, but he still insisted on a rotation of all of them. Mm-hmm. And then finally, towards the end, he realized that Aaron Jones was far and away the better running back and gave him more and more touches. But it was too late by that point. When it was clear to everybody that he should have just given the ball to Aaron Jones, made him the feature back. It's things like that I feel like we had those same criticisms of Dirk Koetter, where he would force feed guys like Jacquizz Rodgers last year when we had, or Doug Martin last year when we had Peyton Barber, who was clearly running better than all the running backs. Mm-hmm. So to me, that's a little scary, but at the same time, I don't think I can be all that picky because say Mike McCarthy makes us playoff contenders and has that issue, then I'm fine because it's better than where we are right now.
Right, right, absolutely. No, I agree 100%.
Yeah, so I mean, it's like you said, they have the Super Bowl experience. Mike McCarthy has that experience, so that's hard to say no to. So then there's, we mentioned Harbaugh. I just don't think that's likely, so I don't want to spend too much time on him. Mm-hmm. Then you have guys, and I'll bring up these guys because I brought them up in my video of going over potential head coaches. The first one, since we'll stay on the offensive side, Eric Bieniemy from Kansas City. Mm-hmm. I don't know too much about him. I did a little bit of research on him, obviously, for the video, but I liked what I saw just simply because of the Andy Reid coaching tree and the fact that he's been working with Pat Mahomes, who is a young quarterback who has a lot of raw potential, and has helped him realize that, obviously with the help of Andy Reid. I would be very interested to see what he does and what he can do, especially considering how the last 2 offensive coordinators under Andy Reid have come in and turned their respective teams around with Matt Nagy and Doug Peterson. Right.
It's funny you say that about Eric Bieniemy. I believe the Buccaneers actually have requested an interview with him. I think that was reported earlier today. So, awesome. They're going to interview him. I believe they requested an interview with somebody else. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. Maybe it was Flores, the defensive coordinator for the Patriots. But yeah, like you said, pretty much anybody from the Andy Reid coaching tree at this point is made of gold. And they're pretty darn valuable because it just seems like they work wherever they go. Yeah. Andy Reid's assistants are insanely good. Yeah, I think he'd be a really wonderful option. He works with Patrick Mahomes. Him and Jameis Winston are, I think, more similar than people, give it credit for. They're very similar quarterbacks. They have big arms. They can throw the ball a ton of yards, and they really like to make breakdown plays work with their legs. And they like making these like crazy jump ball throws and all this crazy stuff. And they work really well. They're very similar. So for that, he is going to be a hot candidate. He's going to be getting a ton of interviews with a ton of teams. One of them being the Bucs. And I think that he's another one of those guys who could do really good things with Jameis Winston and overall the offense. It would be interesting to go from one offensive-minded head coach to another offensive-minded head coach, but I think that he would be an upgrade over Koetter for sure.
Yeah. Real quick, Bucsman 13 has been asking for one last hug for 2018, so
there you go.
Get ready, Bucsman 13. Here I go. All right, there you go. That's the last one of the year at least. So,
sure.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I'm glad that we are interviewing him, at least giving him a look. Who knows what comes of it? I am a little timid on getting unproven guys because I really feel like the state of the team right now just needs somebody who's been there that the guys can look up to. Mm-hmm. But that's not to say that Bieniemy can't be that guy. So I'm just gonna have to trust Licht on that one when he interviews them. Somebody else mentioned, Buck the World Forever said, what about Adam Gase? Which that one I would say just an immediate no to, just simply because if we're going to get a retread guy, I want somebody who has the pedigree like Mike McCarthy or Bruce Arians, has been there, has succeeded, proven success. Somebody who went to a team and failed, I'm just not all that thrilled about.
Right? I mean, it's I mean that'd be a freaking I don't even know if you could call that a retread. That's just kind of like taking somebody's tires and just switching them real quick or something.
Mm-hmm.
So like for Adam Gase, it'll be interesting to see what team he goes to because all of the quarterbacks the only two quarterbacks Adam Gase has had in his career as a head coach, for being starters for the majority of the season is Ryan Tannehill and Jay Cutler. Those are the two.
Yeah,
And even then, in the first year, he went to the playoffs, and then I believe the next 2 years, I believe he went 8-8 and 7-9, which isn't too bad, all things
it's better than
considered.
Cutter.
Right, it's better than Cutter, but I wouldn't necessarily be interested in Gase. He's probably going to end up going to a team that probably wants to switch to an offensive-minded coach. I mean, he is apparently the report is that Adam Gase has already gotten interview requests from the majority of the teams with openings.
Hmm.
So he's going to be a hot candidate. I don't think the Buccaneers should go that route, though. I'd rather pick somebody who's more of
Yeah,
an established guy, you
I
know.
agree. And somebody else, I have somebody else said I want to talk about, but somebody in the chat brought up the OC from the Saints, which is Pete Carmichael. Do you know anything about him?
Not off the top of my head. If memory does serve me well, doesn't Sean Payton call the offensive plays for the?
He
So
does. Yeah.
it's one of those situations where it's like, on surface value, it looks interesting because the Saints have had one of the better offenses for years now. I don't know how long Pete Carmichael's been there, but he does help with the game planning of the offense with Sean Payton,
Right.
which is nice, but I feel there's better options out there. If you had to pick somebody from the Saints organization, Dan Campbell,
Hmm.
that would be an
Interesting.
interesting pick
Yeah.
because he was an interim coach for the Miami Dolphins. He brings a lot of fire. People say he's very old school, and he hasn't had that chance yet. So
Yeah.
that would, if I had to pick somebody from the Saints organization, that would probably be who I would pick.
Well, the issue with the Saints offensive coordinator is it's like, well, is it him or is it Sean Payton and Drew Brees combination, which has been a proven entity for a very long time? It's like
Hmm.
you can't. It's hard to say which what kind of impact an offensive coordinator for the Saints would have. So anyway, just thought I brought there's a couple of guys that the guys brought up in the chat, but one person I want to talk about is the other guy I said in my video, which is Chris Richard, not Richard, as I said in the video. Um,
Oh, okay.
which, by the way, Chris Richard was the name of a former Florida basketball player when I went to UF for the national championship team. So I got that in my mind. But anyway, Chris Richard, Dallas Cowboys, it seems to be another hot candidate, and he would be a defensive guy, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because the defense has been the problem of this team for the last few years. So what would you say to him over say somebody like Eric Bieniemy?
Well, the way I see it right now is I've been looking at a lot of these teams' openings, and I feel one of the best things a team can do when hiring a new head coach is kind of switching from what the old coach. So, like, if you have an offensive-minded coach, switch to a defensive-minded coach. The
Sure.
the reason I say that is because the Bucks offense is fine.
Hmm.
You don't need somebody to come in to focus on the offense. The offense is really good. You just need to bring in a solid coordinator and you'll be fine. We saw that with, this season. The
Yeah.
offense did fine. I feel like the Bucks now need to bring in somebody who can focus on this defense and really get that going because if you have a solid offensive coordinator, this offense can do wonders. You have enough talent there right now to just kind of, for it to not be an issue. The defensive side of the ball, you have a lot of question marks. On the defense, there are good players there, like on the defensive line, linebacking core is obviously one of the betters in the league, but that secondary has a lot of questions, and that's one of the
Hmm.
most important pieces. Chris Richard specializes in working with secondaries.
Hmm.
That's a big deal. That
It
would that
is.
would fix the biggest problem that the Bucks have.
Yep.
Is bringing in a head coach who specializes in secondaries. That's his specialty. That's what he would need. I think a lot of Bucks fans will say that the linebacking core is looking good, defensive line looking one of the best it's looked, certainly better than the season before.
Hmm.
And now a lot of people say the biggest need secondary. Well, you have pieces there. You just need a good coach to bring out the potential. A lot of people have mixed reviews on Vernon Hargraves, and a lot of people like Carlton Davis. and Justin Evans. If you bring in a coach that can tap the potential of those types of players, then, things might not be as bad. You might not have to make as many off-season moves, and have to retool everything. The players
Yeah.
are there. You just need a certain coach to really bring out the potential that this secondary has. And Chris Richard would literally be a really nice, perfect fit for that.
Yeah. I do wonder, and this is all conspiracy theory, or not really a conspiracy theory. I mean, it's grasping at straws, honestly, is what it probably would be. But and maybe that's also the wrong analogy, because I'm not saying this should happen or that I want this to happen. But Chris Richard is a young, hotshot, defensive-minded, specialty on secondary head coach candidate. We had one of those a few years ago, and it didn't turn out so well. Do you wonder if the Glazers might put the kibosh on hiring somebody like that just because they were burned before with Raheem Morris, who was a hot candidate at the time and ended up making this team a prison run by inmates? Let the guys do what they want because he was friends with them and never really had any discipline. Do you think they would be afraid of that happening?
Okay, yes. You could say that the Raheem Morris thing could happen, but you would also just as equally say that the Tony Dungy thing could happen.
That's true.
Tony Dungy was the defensive coordinator for the Minnesota Vikings before he got brought in. He was the same exact age as Chris Richard is right now. They're both 40. So it could go one of two ways. Raheem Morris was 32. That's an 8-year difference. So it could go either way. It's a risky move. The Glazers' recent experience with it isn't very good, but you could also look back to Tony Dungy and say that just as much.
Sure.
A lot of people expect Chris Richard to be a head coach, especially this upcoming offseason. So I could see a little bit of hesitance from the Glazers, and even Jason Licht to a certain degree. I mean, Jason Licht wasn't there, so it doesn't really affect him that much. And I will say the Glazers have also brought in a head coaching search firm to work with Jason Licht in terms of the hiring of the head coaches, so they might advise against that or they might support it. I have no idea. But I could see a little bit of, hesitance from the Glazers for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think bringing up Dungy is a great point with it. I mean, that's a great point where it's like you can't just – everybody's different. And I asked that question kind of in jest. I don't think that's actually going to happen, but I know that if it came out that Chris Richard was bubbling up as a top candidate for us, that suddenly whispers of Raheem Morris would start trickling in. So I thought I would call it out. I agree with you completely. And I think if we go defensive-minded head coach, I would love to have Richard because everything I read about him has just been glowing and positive, and players love him and respect him. And also, I think that leaves the door open for Monken to return and actually run this offense. So if we go defensive-minded, I would not mind seeing the guy go, okay, you know what? I'm just going to take this defense and I'm going to make it, floor top 15. And if we do that and Monken takes this offense to top 10 or top 5 like he did this year, let's go. That's a playoff team right there. So another defensive guy that has been bubbling around in Buccaneers Super Bowl 37 champ has been saying his name a lot in the chat is Vic Fangio, the DC from the Bears, which he's done a lot of great things with the Bears too, and they looked pretty good last year even without Khalil Mack. So what would you think of Fangio?
He's really up there he might be my second or third option. I mean, my top three, it's Bruce Arians and then either Mike McCarthy, Vic Fangio. Those are my top three. Again, similar thing to Chris Richard, except he's a little bit older. He's 60. He's never had an opportunity to be a head coach. I talked about this in one of the videos I did. Yes, he has Khalil Mack. He was doing things before Khalil Mack ever. He's been on other teams and has done really nice things. He was interviewed for the head coaching job last year for the Chicago Bears before Matt Nagy got it. He's very respected around the league, and I don't think it would be insane to say that he will at least get an interview in certain situations like that. It's all about bringing in the right offensive coordinator as well. To the point you said, Corey, about Todd Monken, Um, he has an interview for the Jets head coaching position.
Yeah, I saw that. Thanks to Lord Zither. I don't know how to pronounce your screen name, but yeah, I'm seeing that the Jets are requesting Todd Monken, as they should. I feel like, and I think we would. I don't really know if anybody should be surprised by that because Monken has made this offense, with all its flaws, top five offense. So
Right.
I want to keep him. So it doesn't surprise me that other teams want to interview the guy.
Right.
So it's going to be a little bit of a, race. If we wanted to hang on to Todd Monken, we would have to find the guy that we want and then have him invite Todd Monken there, or maybe tell Monken, hey, just so you know, we might keep you.
Right.
Yeah, it's all about timing, I think there.
Right. You have to give him a lot of money too. That'd probably help.
You would. Yep.
Which is fine. I think he deserves it.
Well, it's like when Mike Smith was a hot head coach candidate after that 9-7 season, and we had to make him the highest paid defensive coordinator in the league. Of course, that didn't work out.
Right.
But I don't know if we would do that again with Monken, but that might be what it takes.
Right. It'll be interesting. I love how, by the way, you hear last year he was getting a ton of potential interviews and whatnot. Now you hear crickets. So that's always interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, Vic Fangio. Back to him. He would be another guy like Chris Richard. Gain immediate respect of this defense, come in and really start focusing on this defense. And he would help out the pass rush, too, make it even greater.
Yeah.
And that, you can never have a bad thing about that, because if you have a good
Definitely.
pass rush, the rest of your team will do good as well, So both those guys would be awesome defensive options. They're two of my... If the Bucs do go with a defensive coach, I hope it's one of them,
Yeah. There are other guys out there too. And the thing is too, is that, 25% of teams in the NFL are looking for a head coach. I mean, there's a huge turnover this year. So we're one of many, which really hurts us. But thankfully, there are a lot of solid guys out there that we could find. I don't think we're going to be pigeonholed into a Shiano situation unless, again, a coach says, yeah, I'll do it, and then backs out after everybody else was hired. So
right.
One other guy, defensive guy, that people are screaming about in the chat, don't worry, guys, I've been getting to it, is the Colts defensive coordinator, Matt Eberflus. Is that how you spell his name or pronounce his name?
Yeah.
Or Eberflus? Eberflus?
Yeah.
Whatever it is. But anyway, he's done a great job in Indy with their defense. Do you know anything about him?
Not a whole lot. I actually haven't done much research into him. I do know that the Colts players respect him, and they overachieve insane amounts for him. That defense has really come alive here towards the end. The Colts have gone on this insane stretch, and now they're in the playoffs. And one of the main reasons is because of their defense and what Matt Eberflus, or whatever his last name is, what he's been able to get out of this really, really young, inexperienced defensive core. He works. He's been working wonders. He could be a dark horse candidate to get an interview and potentially become the head coach of this team. Obviously, it's unfortunate because for certain guys like that who are in the playoffs, we have to wait. Which means it could take upwards of a month before a decision happens, which is killer because us as fans, we want a decision like now. But you have to follow rules, you have to follow regulations. That's not even including the Rooney Rule. So it would be unfortunate, but for guys like that who are in the playoffs, like the Chiefs, the Colts, the Saints, we have to wait.
The Cowboys.
Yeah, we have to wait. All those guys are in the playoffs, so we have to wait, until they're eliminated. Which is unfortunate, but that's what you have to do to get these really high tier guys that a lot of Bucs fans like. You know. So yeah, I would really like him. I think he could get a lot. It's kind of a similar situation, except I feel the Bucs have a young defense, but I think on paper, that tried and true thing we like to say, on paper, the Bucs defense, is just as young, but it's better in terms of overall talent. So I feel he could get just as much out, if not more, from the Bucs defense.
Well, and speaking of that, I mean, that goes back to the Jason Light talk, and this is what I've been saying. People laugh at me on Twitter. Somebody called me delusional, even.
Oh.
But the reason the way I see it is the fact that the Glazers fired Koetter and kept Light shows me that they see this team the way I see it, and that's that this team has the talent on its team, like on its roster. This year, they had the talent to win, and they underachieved. If they felt like this team didn't have the talent to win, Light would also be gone. But the reason they fired the head coach was because, hey, we gave you everything you needed to win, and your teams did not win. So therefore, you're let go. And I think that is something that people aren't really paying attention. Now, some people probably disagree with the Glazers on that. And people are fine to disagree that we don't really have the talent to win. It's the whole like, oh, you are what your record says you are. After following this team at least for the last 2 years, I actually don't adhere to that adage, and that's probably sacrilege in football. I don't think you are what your record says you are. Like the bounce of the ball, it can just go a weird way, and you have a weird year. I really felt that way about last season. The whole Murphy's Law thing. I thought we were a better team than 5 wins last year. I think we're a better team than five wins this year, and that's why Dirk Koetter was fired. So I think you're right. I think we do have the talent on this defense as is when they're healthy.
Right.
And people forget that, hey, we got decimated by injury at one of our thinnest positions. And that hurts, like imagine if we went this entire year with Vernon Hargreaves, with Jordan Whitehead and Justin Evans together the whole time, with Chris Conti even, and with Quan Alexander still there the whole time.
And Kendall Beckwith.
And Kendall Beckwith, absolutely. Imagine if they were healthy and we had fired Mike Smith in the offseason like we probably should have, how different this team, this season might have turned out. Obviously, we can only speculate, but if you follow this team at all, you'd have to sit there and think, man, yeah, we probably have at least 2 or 3 more wins, which, is still just a 500 record, but, you never know.
That probably would have saved Dirk Koetter's job.
It probably would have. It probably would have.
So it's interesting, and it just goes to show, like, if this team's fully healthy, they have the talent. Look what Mark Duffner was able to do in certain situations with a really banged up secondary and a really banged up linebacker core. He was still able to get some really good games out of this defense. So whenever fully healthy, they have the talent there. They just need the right coach to extract that potential on the defensive side of the ball.
Can we just sit here and just congratulate and praise Mark Duffner for what he did this year? I remember you and I, when Mike Smith was fired, we did a live stream, and I was pumping the brakes, and I was like, do not expect just a drastic turnaround because it's the same players, it's the same scheme. But, man, what a difference Duffner made on this defense. And it's not going to show up per se on the stat sheet as much as the impact that we saw on the field. The guy deserves all the praise in the world, and wherever he goes, I hope he has success because, man, he made lemonade out of lemons here.
Right.
And he deserves all the praise in the world.
I could see him getting a defensive coordinator position with another team. Jason Licht did say that Monken and Buckner wouldn't be brought back considering their contracts have expired and they're free to go look for other opportunities. So I could see Buckner getting an opportunity somewhere else because what Buckner did was incredible. He took what was leading up to be one of the worst defenses in NFL history. Let me say that one again. And he made it somewhat he made it competent, made it better with spare parts, no less. So that was an incredible thing. That was one of the more positive things of the second half of this Bucs season. It wasn't always perfect, no team is, but he did have a couple of games there where it was like this defense is playing lights out,
Yeah.
I do hope Duffner gets an opportunity somewhere else.
Okay, so there's plenty of coach talk to come, I'm sure, as candidates arise and everything, and we could talk about that in sometime in the future. First of all, Bucksman13 in the chat says, how about James be head coach, Corey be offensive coordinator, and James Pigo be defensive coordinator?
It's a meme, Corey. I'll tell you about the meme later.
Okay. Anyway, I would be a horrible offensive coordinator or coach in general. You don't want me. I might be better in the front office, but it's still probably pretty bad. So anyway, I would love to talk right now the roster as it stands. You got a lot of players up in the air as to whether or not they'll be back. I mean, obviously, Brent Grimes is gone. Deshaun Jackson's gone. I think we all know that. I think the big one to talk about is Gerald McCoy. Whether or not, number one, do we want him back? But number two, will he be back? And from what I'm reading and what I'm seeing, it seems like he thinks he's not even going to be back. So what do you
Um,
think there?
well, they asked Jason Light about this. They asked him both about Jameis Winston and both about Gerald McCoy. And for Jameis Winston, they said, "Oh, he's going to be back for the 2019 season. He'll be back." And then they later on in this press conference that they just had today, they asked him about Gerald McCoy. His response quickly was, "We have a lot of tough decisions to make." Very different answer,
Yeah,
considering both guys are pretty much faces of this franchise.
yeah,
I don't think it's, I don't think you should write it off completely that Bucs are going to get rid of Gerald McCoy. I could see them reaching out and trying to rework his contract, very, very much so. Trying to rework his contract and kind of make it more team friendly. And if that were to happen, I would like to think that Gerald McCoy would consider that.
hmm
He seems like he is a really team player type guy.
he is.
Um,
Yeah,
so I would see. I'm not going to say that the Bucs are going to get rid of Gerald McCoy because we have no idea, but I do think they would more likely than not reach out and try and restructure his contract. I think that's for sure a possibility. You know.
I would love to see him back, especially seeing how far along Vita Vea's come this year. While Gerald McCoy, it looks like he is finally on the downslope of his career. I think he's still a force, and I think he still commands the respect of offensive lines across the league, and would take blocks away from Vea. I think he could add a lot to this team. But yeah, it might take a restructure.
Hmm.
And like you said, it's very possible. Gerald has been the face of this franchise since he was drafted, and probably through to when Jameis was drafted, and then even so, is still a face of this franchise. Always has his face on the billboards and everything. So, I I would love. What I would like to see, and what I bet we'll see, is we will make him an offer that is competitive, and it will be up to him.
Hmm.
We'll see. I mean, I think it all depends on what coach we hire, right?
Right.
But it'll be interesting to see where he goes. So some other guys that are due for are due to be free agents, I guess, are Quan Alexander, who unfortunately was hurt in a contract year. Donovan Smith, who had a poor season, I would say, below average. Who else? Is it? There was one other person.
Adam Humphries.
Oh, Adam Humphries.
Yeah.
Adam Humphries. Are there any of those guys you want back? Any of those guys that you think will be back?
Adam Humphries and Quan, I want back. Donovan Smith, I'm really on the fence about.
Yeah.
I think you could upgrade over Donovan Smith. But you could do a lot worse than Donovan Smith, I feel like. Like you could have
Yeah.
Eric Flowers from the New York Giants, Luke Jokel from the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah.
You could do worse, but you could do a lot better. So if I had to keep two, get rid of one, Humphries, Quan, get rid of Donovan, which ones do I think will be back? That's really tough to say. Because you could say, give Quan a 1-year deal, 1-year prove-it deal, make it like $8.5 million, something like that.
Yeah.
The Bucs could offer that, but if Quan's agent tells him a team's going to offer you like $10 million a year regardless of your injury, Quan's going to take that probably. I would.
Yeah, you couldn't blame him if he did.
So I feel doing a prove-it deal is really risky. I feel like it's either sign Quan to a long-term deal or you risk losing him in free agency. And that would be a big hole at middle linebacker. You could slide Kendall Beckwith in there or even have Jack Sitchie, but that's risky. Both of them have proven to have injuries in the past.
Yeah.
So that one's really risky. For Adam Humphries, he's one of the better slots in the NFL right now. The highest paid slot receiver right now, Albert Wilson, he's making $8 million a season. So that you have to ask yourself, are you comfortable paying Adam Humphries $8 million a season? That's a lot of money. You're paying a guy like Deshaun Jackson $11 million a year. He's probably going to be gone. You could take some of that money and give it to Adam Humphries. So ultimately, I think they will try really hard to bring back Adam Humphries as well. But it's another one of those things where it's like you have to pay to keep your good players.
Yep,
You're gonna have to pay. You're gonna have to give him long deals. You can't mess around with that. And for Donovan Smith, that one's a lot more interesting because Adam Humphries, Quan Alexander, they've proven that they're worth the money.
for
Donovan
sure.
Smith has at sometimes proven he's worth the money, but at other times he's proven to be an average starting left tackle, at times. So
Yeah.
how do you figure that kind of contract? He's going to demand a lot of money, um, and he probably won't take a average baseline offer or whatnot. I think that one you let walk to free agency and figure it out then.
Yeah. Donovan Smith, it's just because of the position he plays, it's just so scary. And it's such a tough decision because he is middle of the line left tackle at best. So like you said, you could do a lot worse. And getting rid of a left tackle who, while he's not great, is not poor, like is not at the bottom of the league. Can't has shown he can be, but when you don't have anybody behind him, what do you do there? That one's going to be worth following, like what the free agent market's going to look like. But then again, with left tackles, you're going to find other Donovan Smiths on and free agency because people just don't get rid of left tackles that are worth anything. So, and like you said, somebody's going to offer him money that we're not going to be willing to pay him because he is an average left tackle. So and it's terrifying. You don't want to just throw a rookie out there protecting Jameis's blind side.
Right.
So I don't envy Light and the guys that have to make this decision with Donovan Smith. I'm honestly, he's dead to me. Like I don't. After this year, at the beginning of this year, I was like, no, you have to keep Donovan. You have to extend him because he is still at least a decent left tackle, and if he's gone, you're screwed. But
Mm-hmm.
man, he showed so many times, especially later in the year, where he would throw up his arms and then just watch, and James would be scrambling for his life, and Donovan would, block initially, but his inward clock is like, okay, it's been 3 to 5 seconds, so I'm just going to stop playing. It's probably over. Turn around, and James would be right there, and he'd get sacked or hit.
Right.
And the biggest thing that he did that just really got under my nerves was when the defense was offsides, and Donovan, instead of blocking the guy who was attacking his quarterback, threw up his arms, calling for a flag, let his guy go by him, and he creamed Jameis.
Yeah, that was the biggest one
So
that sticks with a lot of people, that play in particular.
that was indicative of what his attitude. He's been lackadaisical. He's been lethargic, and his head hasn't been in it. It doesn't seem like he has that kind of Mahler mentality that you need, where he plays to the whistle, and that he doesn't get up. He doesn't give up. Like if he gets thrown to the ground, he gives up and gets up slowly, and then watches the rest of the play. He doesn't get back up and continue to play. So I would say let's let him walk and figure it out. But man, it's so scary because who are you going to replace him with?
Well, I think, like what you said, Donovan's more replaceable than Humphreys and Quan. A lot of people say that, it's a deep wide receiver class. Justin Watson, we have him. Still, Adam Humphries is really reliable, like underrated in terms of how reliable he is. He's one of Jameis's top options. He's really good. I think he's even underrated among some Bucs fan circles. And then for Quan Alexander, he's one of the captains of our team. He's one of the leaders of our defense. Both those guys deserve a lot of money. And
Yeah,
I think we'd be hard pressed to replace them for sure. Donovan Smith, like what you said, you can get a Donovan Smith in free agency in some certain ways, or even a serviceable option.
yeah,
And you can find a Donovan Smith in the draft. I know there would be some concerns about throwing a rookie left tackle out there to start off the year, but that's what they did with Donovan Smith, right?
yeah.
So
That's true.
it is what it is. Donovan would be the easiest to replace out of all three of them, I feel like.
Well, and the big thing about Quan and Adam Humphries is what they mean in the locker room. Jameis has gone on and on and on about how much he loves Adam Humphries, and if you take away his security blanket, one of the good guys, so to speak, that like gets it, wants to win, has that competitive nature, and has a great rapport with Jameis, that might push him over the edge as to like, hey, he might be worth a little bit more money than his market value just because of what he means to the quarterback and what he means in the locker room. And I think the same goes for Quan, who has stepped up immediately as one of the leaders in the locker room, as the heart and soul of his defense off the field and on the field, regardless of his play. And yeah, Quan has been up and down. He's been inconsistent. and all those things, he still has that raw talent, and we've seen enough flashes from him that the what he means to the team by way of his leadership and what he means in the locker room, I think makes it worth the money to do what we can to keep him.
Absolutely, I agree 100%.
And then there's other guys like Cam Brate, which we would have the option to cut if we wanted to, I think. And he obviously had a down year. Yeah, even when OJ went down, that was Brate's time to shine. He had a lot of drops and didn't look like the same Cam Brate we're used to. You have guys like Chris Conti, who is probably done here.
Yeah, he's probably done. He's not terrible, but that doesn't mean he's gonna stay. He's probably done. Especially with Jordan Whitehead doing what he was able to do.
For sure. I think the necessity of Conti has gone. And regardless of what people think of Conti, he was a necessity for this team. But now I think we finally found the people that can replace him and do as good, if not better, of a job. So
Right.
So any other players that I'm missing here that
Peyton
seem to be
Barber?
kind of
Peyton
Peyton
Barber's
Barber.
his contract ran out. He's going to be a free agent. That'll be a big one.
That is a big one.
How much do you pay Peyton Barber? How does Peyton Barber even gauge his own market value at this point? Because he's so underutilized. It'll be interesting. Peyton Barber might be another one you let walk into free agency just for him to gauge his own market value. And who knows? Peyton Barber's another one that you'd probably really consider bringing back as well. But you do have Ronald Jones there. Jason, whoever the new coach is, Jason Licht wants Ronald Jones to play, obviously. He drafted him.
Absolutely.
So who knows? You might not bring back Peyton Barber since Ronald Jones is there. I have no idea. But that's certainly going to be another question that is going to be brought up for sure. Fitzpatrick, he's probably not coming back. I think Ryan Griffin's contract runs out as well. I could be wrong.
Yeah.
New backup quarterback situation.
Yeah. Do you think that we would bring back Ryan Griffin, or do you think we're drafting a quarterback?
It's tough to say because
too early to say, probably.
It is too early to say, but also I like the point that a lot of people have been bringing up, saying, if you're going to draft a quarterback, why would you do it? If you draft a quarterback late, then that person's going to be a backup for their career for the most part. They're not going to challenge Jameis for their starting job, so it almost seemed like a waste of a pick. You can get a backup quarterback in free agency, or you can even re-sign a Fitzpatrick or a Ryan Griffin. So really, I don't think the Bucs will draft a quarterback this year. I could see them drafting one next year, depending on how things go. But ultimately, I think they'll either bring back one of the Ryans or they'll get something in free agency, and it'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it will be interesting to see where Griff goes. I was glad he didn't play because obviously that would have meant that Jameis got hurt, but obviously they inactivated Ryan Fitzpatrick and had Ryan Griffin as the number 2 QB. And I was interested to see if he ever saw the field. He never did. And it would be kind of a shame to never see him actually show what he could do. But I think the big knock against Griffin is the reason we held on to him, which is the fact that he knew the system and he'd been in the system for years and years. And he was just a good guy to hold on to. But now it's going to be a brand new system. So now he's kind of back to square one. So there's not any real reason to hold on to him if we have the opportunity to bring in somebody that either has more talent or is a veteran that we know can jump in as a backup. So, it'll be interesting to see where we go there. But we have a long off season ahead of us. James, I want to thank you for joining us. As we've gone over an hour, and man, I did not think we'd have this much to talk about, but we really do. And there's a lot of wait and see stuff. And the season's over, but man, we're not in the off season yet because there's just so many question marks and things that have to fall into place before we even get to Super Bowl Sunday. So,
right.
Thanks for joining. And I think, guys, thanks for joining me in the chat. I think we had over 40. Right now we have over 40 people watching. So thanks for participating, guys, in the chat. Sorry I couldn't get to a lot of your comments. They were going fast and furious. Thanks for communicating and being part of the Bucs community because, hey, there's not a lot of us out there anymore. A lot of the casual fans have just turned off. But you guys are the diehards. We all are the Bucs fan community, and I love chatting with you guys on Twitter. I love chatting with you guys here on the chat, and I love talking with guys like James over here, like Gene from Buck What You Heard, who was in the chat. Thanks for joining us. The Bucs fan creator community has been amazing and has made this miserable season worth it. Would you agree, James?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all we have is each other.
Yeah.
We don't have much else to rely on. So we can all suffer together, and that's what brings us together.
Misery
So
loves company for sure.
right.
So yeah, lots more to talk to you. And if you guys aren't subscribed to Mr. Bucs Nation, do that now. James, I don't know if you want to put it in the chat or something like that. You can put your link down there.
Sure.
But obviously, you guys can just search for him, Mr. Bucs Nation. James puts out way more content than I do, and he knows more than I do. Not just about this team, but around the league as well. So I personally, just to let you guys know, I'm going to be really scaling back just because work has gotten crazy and holidays and all that stuff. I'm not going to be as regular with the in-studio videos. I'm going to try to do more live streams, and it's probably not going to have a regular schedule. You're just going to have to follow me on Twitter at the Play Reaction. You'll find out when we're going to go live, when we have new videos. And obviously, you can click the subscribe and the bell notification icon so you'll know when there's new video up and all that stuff. So there's more to come, guys. And thanks for joining us. We'll have a lot more to talk about, and maybe we'll do another one of these once we know who the next coach will be.
That's true.
So
it'll be a lot. There will be a lot to talk about. For sure. There will be a lot to
definitely.
talk
All right, guys. Well, I hope you all have a happy New Year. Enjoy your parties. Drive safe. Get a designated driver if you need to, if you're out partying tonight. And I guess we'll see you next year. Thanks for joining us, and go Bucs.
See you guys. Go Bucs.